This is the U.S. Report with James Morrow.
Good evening and welcome to the program. Coming up tonight, Annelise Nielsen joins me from South Carolina ahead of the first official primary as Nikki Haley vows to stay in the race and keep on battling Trump for victory in her home state. Plus, Donald Trump himself finally gives us some insight into who his vice presidential candidate could be. We'll find out who with Mick Mulvaney in a little bit. And you're not going to want to miss this one. I'm going to tell you all about the unhinged mayor in Illinois who's now being investigated by the FBI for all sorts of funny business. But first, by the end of the weekend, barring some sort of unforeseen event, and let's be honest here, there have been more than a few of them of late, Donald Trump will be essentially the Republican nominee on the ticket in November. Nikki Haley will hang around hoping to be the Bradbury candidate, but I certainly wouldn't count on it. Which means one thing. Donald Trump and his supporters now have to shift hard into general election mode. It's not enough to have the base on side, as important as that is. No, Donald Trump has got to go out and start getting ready to harvest that majority of electoral votes. And yes, the polls are on his side. According to the Real Clear Politics aggregate, Trump wins a general election by almost 2 points. He's also up in key battleground states like Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, Michigan, and Nevada. And slipping third-party candidates like RFK Jr. and Cornel West into the mix seems to cost Biden a lot more support than it does Trump. Wonder if that's why they're not giving RFK Secret Service protection despite his repeated pleas. Oh, but I digress. That's crazy talk. But looking ahead, I want to preview 3 big hurdles Trump is going to need to overcome to win. Hurdle number 1, money. Donald Trump may be a rich guy, but we all know that big money in America has been pouring into the Democrats for at least 3 decades now, and it's not stopping now with the Biden campaign. The latest campaign finance filings should concern Trump. Joe Biden scooped up $42 million in donations in January. By contrast, Trump campaign brought in just $8.8 million. The Trump campaign also ended the month with just around $30 million in the bank, in contrast to the Biden campaign, which closed out the month with $56 million. What's more, the number of Trump donors is falling, with 200,000 fewer donors this time around at this point in the election than the last time of the election cycle. Now, it's not panic stations, but it is something he needs to worry about, especially considering hurdle number 2, legal threats. A little later in the program, I'll be joined by Robert Barnes to talk about Trump's legal struggles. But what we've learned this week shows just how far the left is going to go to take him down. Within the nearly $500 million judgment a New York judge handed down against Trump for the crime of, let me check here, taking out loans from banks and then paying them back in full, well, there's a provision that essentially forces the former and possible future president to stump up the entire fine before he can appeal. Really. Now, I don't care what you think of Trump, but this is partisan abuse of the justice system to bankrupt somebody for standing against the Democrat regime. And they're not going to stop there. The Fonnie Willis clown show in Georgia is continuing on charges of election interference. There's still the classified documents matter. Hello, Joe Biden. And then there are the attempts to keep Trump off the ballot in as many as 30 states. Because, as you know, it's only preserving our democracy if people are forced to vote only one way. Finally, hurdle number 3, woke social media. We all know how hard social media companies stepped on the scales in 2020 to skew the election. The suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop was just one element in a much larger, dishonest campaign to, as they called it, secure the election and strengthen our democracy. Yeah, right. Now, this year, it's only going to get stronger. And the same forces that are trying to take Trump out with the legal system are also going to try hard to stifle social media and censor anything that they don't like by calling it misinformation. Now, why are they fighting so hard with every tool in their arsenal? Well, simply because Joe Biden is, to come back to where we started, weak. According to Gallup, he should lose the election. And probably the biggest reason that Joe Biden is looking shaky going into the election is that, well, he's looking shaky, period. I mean, just look at this from the other day when a member of the press asked him about his upcoming State of the Union address and winning re-election.
Win re-election.
He's going to win re-election anyway.
So there he was, confused, not knowing what's going on, and before the press is hustled out of the room, one of his boosters had to step in to get a rousing cheer while the president looked on, not knowing what was happening. Right now it feels like America, like that clip shows exactly how America is divided into two halves. The half that knows there's something wrong with Biden and says so, and the half that knows there's something wrong but says, "Don't believe your lying eyes. Everything's fine. And anyway, it's not like he's the guy really in charge." Trump and his supporters need to realize how big that group might turn out to be and how hard it could be to shake them out of their self-deception. Well, joining me now from Tolkaw Creek, South Carolina, is our Sky News correspondent, Annelise Nielsen. Annelise, you're in the heart of where the GOP Republican primary contest is going to take place. Big question here, why is Nikki Haley even still in this thing?
Well, look, there's a few different factors here, and it is a legitimate question to ask. When we look at the polling averages today, we're just a few days out from the South Carolina primary, and right now we have Donald Trump on about 78% and Nikki Haley 16%. That's not insignificant when we're talking about the state where Nikki Haley was governor 2 times around, and quite a popular governor at that. It shows just how devoted this base is to Donald Trump through these primary races. And again, remember, it's very small turnout for the people who cast a ballot in a primary compared to those who turn out in a general election. And this doesn't include those independents that Nikki Haley's hoping to pull over. It doesn't include those theoretical Democrats who might switch a ticket, even though that's much more unlikely. What we're seeing here is a long game. This is a very unusual election. Essentially, you've got 2 incumbent presidents going again. You've got Nikki Haley trying to say, I am the alternative, and right now she is the only one. But the realistic thing is she needs to hold out until at least Super Tuesday, which is coming up in just 2 weeks' time. That's when we're going to have 16 states report their primary results. And so from that, we'll have 50% of those delegates who are going to the conventions then allocated. It only matters for the first round of voting, but this could be a convention unlike any we've seen in a lifetime. This could be one that's highly contested, and so this would matter. Nikki Haley's playing the long game, saying, I've got the donors to keep me going, so I'm going to make myself the alternative if Donald Trump gets knocked out of this race, if it's because of his funding issues, because of his lawsuits, or if it's because he gets knocked out because he's convicted of something, or just simply gets fed up with the whole process. Yeah. That's the game that seems to be played.
Okay, so let's war game this a little bit here. What are voters telling you if something happened to Trump, there was some legal issue, whatever, for whatever reason, he doesn't wind up going through? She goes in with all the delegates. She may wind up being the nominee, but would Trump voters then on Election Day come out for her because Trump has really poisoned the well against her?
And this is the issue. The voters we've been talking to today, since we've first been in South Carolina, have said that they don't like that she started to become more critical of Donald Trump. That's isolating more of the Republican base, even if it might be bringing over some of those more independents who are becoming less enamored with Donald Trump as the years go by. But the other issue here is the more that Donald Trump is pursued in these legal contexts, the more people say that they don't like that he's been pursued by lawfare, is one of the terms that you hear used quite often. And so it makes them more likely to support Donald Trump and say, I'm not going to support anyone else. The long bet is that when it comes to November, which is still a ways away, that they would still vote Republican. And that's what one of the bets that Nikki Haley's campaign is having to play.
All right, now let's flip over to the other side of the aisle here. Joe Biden, continuing concerns about where he winds up in all of this. Now, they've got a convention coming up, too, in Chicago. Chicago is where the Democrats had an incredibly chaotic campaign in 1968. What are the chances, you think, that something happens with Biden at that convention or even after? How would it work for them to tap Joe Biden on the shoulders? Because every single poll is saying Americans think he's too old, he doesn't have the mental facility to keep doing the job, and they don't want to wind up with a situation where they vote Biden and get Kamala Harris.
Yeah, look, this is the conversation that everyone's having. I talk to Australians all the time who bring it up, but it's absolutely on the minds of Americans. And what we need to remember here is these conventions where the candidates are confirmed, the parties set the rules. So the Democratic National Committee and the Republican National Committee set the rules for these conventions, which confirm who will be the candidate on the ballot come November. So right now, my understanding after speaking to quite a few experts around what the rules are for the Democratic National Convention is if Joe Biden is confirmed and then for some reason steps back after that, the DNC can appoint someone, and that the RNC currently their procedure would be to reconvene the convention, which is a huge undertaking. Sheer money-wise would be extraordinary, but it gives the DNC more options to just say, hey, actually, we're going to take so-and-so, maybe a Gavin Newsom, into the equation, because Kamala Harris does have very poor personal polling, and that's one of the things that Nikki Haley brings up quite consistently that does rate well for her, is she says, hey, look, at the end of this, we're going to have a female president if you like it or not. It's going to be me or Kamala Harris, up to you. So this is where the DNC has some room to maneuver before the convention, in playing its superdelegates or afterwards, and simply appointing their preferred pick.
And now this whole age issue around Joe Biden, that's going to keep playing out because, number one, we've got a State of the Union address coming up. Number two, Robert Hur, who was the special counsel who wrote that bombshell report about Joe Biden where he basically said he was, an elderly old guy with poor memory and all of that. He's testifying to Congress. What do we expect to come out of that? And is that going to wind up further aggravating this issue that Joe Biden is, either doddering, corrupt, or both?
Well, look, Democrats are already spinning this, saying Robert Hur was too specific in this report. He was gratuitous in his descriptions of Joe Biden, and it was inappropriate that he was going into these descriptions about his memory, about what he was bringing up, and how it was impacted by his age. What's likely to happen here when he does testify to Congress is that they will ask him specific questions around what Joe Biden has counted after this report. So specifically, Joe Biden said that he was so enraged when the special prosecutor raised his son, Beau. That's why he got mixed up with his details, and that's why he was so upset. But Robert Hur has now backgrounded out of this deposition process for the special hearing, and then now before the special hearing is likely to say that it was actually Joe Biden who raised that in the first place unprompted. What this does is just give new conversation to the fact that there's dispute around what was said by who, when, and how much of that is contributed to by Joe Biden's failing memory. So this is going to be absolutely appointment viewing for anyone watching this election race.
Well, keep watching here on the U.S. Report because we're going to bring you all of that. But one final quick one for you. I love this story. Lawyers for Hunter Biden have claimed that a picture a government prosecutors are using to support a tax fraud case against him, that shows neatly arranged lines of some sort of powder. Well, actually, those are neatly arranged lines of sawdust from a carpentry shop and not something else. Annelise, this doesn't pass, dare I say it, the sniff test, does it?
Well, I mean, we always wondered what was in his consulting business. Maybe it's woodwork. Maybe this is what was happening with all of his consulting jobs. Who knows? I don't think it passes the pub test, the sniff test either. I don't know. It's just another torrid chapter in a very uncomfortable discussion.
Absolutely. Annelise Nielsen, live from South Carolina. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And joining me now to take a deeper dive into the race and what's going on in South Carolina is former White House Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor at Bondi Partners, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, the big South Carolina primary is Saturday, your home state. We're going to get results Sunday morning in Australia, probably as we're broadcasting Outsiders, so tune in for that. But walk us through the process in South Carolina. Is this one of these things where people from the other party can go and vote for the Republican and try and lift Nikki Haley's vote? Is it that kind of thing where there's crossover voting? Tell our viewers how this all goes down.
Yeah, and you asked the right question, James, because every state in our nation is a little bit different when it comes to primaries. In South Carolina, technically, we don't register by party. We register to vote, but not as a Democrat or Republican, as an independent. And essentially what happens is you can vote in any primary that you want to. You just can't vote in two. Now, the Democrats already had their primary a couple of weeks ago. Joe Biden won 90%. And if you voted in that Democrat primary, you can't vote in Republican primary. So in theory, pretty much everybody in the state could vote tomorrow because not that many people voted in the Democrat primary. In practice, mostly just Republicans vote. It's not like New Hampshire where independents typically voted the Republican primary. Here, only Republicans typically vote in the Republican primary. The polling looks really, really bad for Nikki Haley. The last number I saw, I had her down by between 28 and 32 points in her home state. There's no number of left-leaning independents or centrist voters who can save her from that type of polling disadvantage.
Well, now this is the next question then. Why is she staying in this? We spoke to Annelise Nielsen a little while ago. She said Haley is waiting for Super Tuesday to scoop up delegates and to be a candidate who's there in case something happens to Trump. How much weight do you put in that sort of theory?
Nobody knows. It sounds interesting. It sounds like it's possible, but keep in mind, just because she's still in the race doesn't mean if Donald Trump gets hit by an asteroid that she's automatically the nominee. This works by winning delegates, and Trump delegates. If Trump wins all of the delegates and then gets hit by a bus and dies, Trump delegates are not going to be voting for Nikki Haley. And even if he dies before he gets enough delegates, keep in mind, all these other people who dropped out of the race have technically only suspended their campaigns. So this week in South Carolina, Ron DeSantis is still on the ballot. Chris Christie is still on the ballot. Vivek Ramaswamy is still on the ballot, even though they're out of the race. So no, I don't think Nikki wins by simply being the last person around who isn't named Donald Trump if something were to happen to the leading candidate.
Yeah, the mechanics of this are fascinating because there is so many things at play for both of these candidates. Trump with his legal issues, both of them with their age. It's a lot. There's a lot going on, but Trump at the same time has to still act now, I suppose, Mick, as if he is the candidate, which brings us to the question of running mate. Who would be Trump's VP? He had this to say when a list of candidates was put to him this week.
Vivek Ramaswamy, he's made a big splash. Ron DeSantis, obviously Tim Scott, Byron Donalds, Tulsi Gabbard. Very interesting. Are they all on your short list? And
what do you make of that list? Is that the short list, or are there other names on there that are not on that list that weren't mentioned that he's also got in his head?
Yeah, keep in mind, about 6 weeks ago, he said he had already made the pick, but it was a secret. Look, this is Vice President Apprentice is what it comes down to. He's going to milk this as long as he possibly can. He's a master of what we call earned media, which is getting on television for free without having to pay advertising rates and so forth. He will drag this out as long as he possibly can. The four names you and I have talked about before that seem to be the top tier are Elise Stefanik, a congresswoman from New York, Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, Tim Scott, the African-American senator from South Carolina, and my long shot, Ben Carson, the former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. So those are the 4 names that keep coming up. A lot of names will be thrown out, and Trump loves it when new names get added to the list because it's free advertising for him.
How much then does Trump in his head, when he's balancing these two things out, have to consider that he doesn't want somebody who's going to be too big and overshadow him, because that would be the Trump personality, with the fact that voters will look at his age and think, you know, this person has a greater shot, a greater chance of one day possibly stepping in the chair if there's a turn in Trump's health or anything else that happens?
I think that's a lot more relevant for Joe Biden. Even the folks who are starting to wonder about Donald Trump's age have not gotten to the point yet where they don't think he can serve the 4 years. They might be uncomfortable voting for him because of his age, but they don't think he's not going to make it. That Biden is really dealing with that. Kamala Harris is going to be an issue in this race for Joe Biden. I think, listen, anytime a president picks a vice president, they want to be able to look the public in the eye and say, this person is ready if something happens to me. And Trump will be wanting to do that. But I don't think it's that big a deal. I think on the Republican side, Donald Trump is such a force that he can pretty much take anybody's vice president, and it's not going to change his outcomes politically one way or the other.
Yeah, no, Mick, I think you're probably right on that one. But before I let you go, we've still got to talk about Joe Biden and the ongoing burbling impeachment inquiry. And this week we had James Biden, the brother, say that their relationship had nothing to do with his business career and that he never asked Joe Biden for official favors. And, you know, Mick, I completely believe him, and I'm sure that you do too, except for the fact that, of course, this contradicts a lot of evidence that's already out there, including bank records and checks and a number of other things. Now, to people who follow this really closely, this feels like a big deal, but does this have any political impact on the broader race, or is it just too hard at this point to get people to tune in on this sort of scandal?
Yes, but it does get people. It's hard to get people to tune in. There's so much, scandal around Hunter Biden and so forth. This story is not really making it all the way to the top here in the domestic press. It's getting a little bit of coverage, but not nearly some of the other things that are happening with Biden, for example, surrounding his age. He had more difficulties again this week. But it continues to do this, James, which is Joe Biden in 2020 was able to tell people, I'm the normal candidate. If you're tired of all of the fireworks and all of the activity, all of the craziness with Donald Trump, vote for me. This is just another piece of that falling apart. With the president's brother coming out, now being a little bit of an issue, it continues to wear away at sort of that veneer of calm and sort of sanity that Biden was pitching in 2020, that he's having a very difficult time pitching in 2024, which is one of the reasons he's struggling as bad as he is.
Mick Mulvaney, we're going to have to leave it there, but absolutely fascinating times. Thank you so much for your insight, as always. Now, hey, there's been a lot of talk about the president, and let's check in on the commander-in-chief and see just how he's faring these days. You know, they're letting him use the short stairs up Air Force One. How is that going? Yeah. Oh, 1, 2, well, yeah, he almost made it there without stumbling. Anyway, after the break, the poison pill and the New York judgment against Trump coming up. Welcome back to the program. Before I bring on my next guest, I wanted to share with you a really curious video that the White House released on social media the other day. Now, on the face of it, it doesn't seem all that remarkable. It's a video of the president talking about NATO and taking a shot at Donald Trump for his remarks about the alliance. But what struck me is the number of jump cuts in this.
An attack on one is an attack on all. That's what NATO's Article 5 says. It's a simple but powerful concept, and embodies why one of America's greatest sources of strength is our alliances. They're not only important to us, they're important to the rest of the world. In the entire history of NATO, Article 5 has only been invoked once, to stand with the United States of America after we were attacked on 9/11. The whole world knows if any adversary were to attack us, our NATO allies would have our back, and they know we would have their backs as well.
And that was just the first 30 or so seconds. Now, I thought this was curious, and so did Joe Concha, who often comes on this program. He tweeted, quote, "So when you've worked on the producing end, as I did in my former life, some things are painfully easy to spot when the post-edit is complete. In this case, I counted 28 cuts in this 2-minute video. 28. In something this short, maybe you do 5 to 6 cuts max." Now, the question, of course, is why? Why would they do so many cuts like that for a short little video? Well, I don't want to get all conspiratorial here, but there's pretty much 2 options. One, someone in the White House decided that they would get a bit clever with the editing software and just went a little bit overboard. Or, maybe 2, they used 2 cameras to jump between takes without it seeming obvious, or they tried to so that every time the president stumbled, lost his words, or had a miscue, they could put it back together again. To put it another way, the question is this a case of incompetence or incompetence? You be the judge. Now, the legal hits keep on coming for Donald Trump, and the world is waking up to the full banana republic nature of the judgment handed down against the former president in New York City last week. Joining me now to discuss Donald Trump's legal woes is expert trial attorney Robert Barnes. Robert, thanks so much for joining us on the U.S. Report. I want to talk about some of the specifics in this ruling in Trump's New York civil fraud case last week. Now, he was ordered to pay nearly $355 million US. That's over $500 million Australian. Barred from doing business in New York for 3 years. Trump's lawyers are asking for a delay in enforcement of the judgment, but there's also this poison pill in here, which is that he can't borrow money to even pay off the thing so he can appeal it from any New York institution. Tell us about this, and how much is this just the Democrats utterly weaponizing the justice system to punish Donald Trump? And Robert, this is the thing that really concerns me, and this is what I always tell people. You know, it shouldn't matter whether or not you like Trump or think he's the worst human being ever to live. The fact of the matter is, today they're going after Donald Trump using the law. Tomorrow it could be some other person or somebody else who, or you, who doesn't toe the line in whatever the kind of political regime of the day wants. And I want to play here. Here's what New York Attorney General Letitia James said she's prepared to do if Donald Trump can't stump up the cash.
If he does not have funds to pay off the judgment, then we will seek, judgment enforcement mechanisms in court, and we will ask the judge to seize his assets.
This is basically communism here, seizing your assets for opposing the regime, isn't it, Robert? Well, I mean, constitutionally, it's essentially, you know, it's a bill of attainder. It's going after one particular person using the legal system that's supposed to be free and fair to all, isn't it? Well, Robert, what is wild to me, though, is that, you know, you've got all these New York liberals cheering, going, yeah, 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 we got Trump. But, you know, having been in New York about 6 months ago, I can tell you the economy doesn't need this sort of chasing out of successful businesses. People I talk to are saying that it's a witch hunt, and in New York, people are now saying, I'm not sure I want to go and invest in a place like this. Just have a listen to this guy.
New York was already a loser state, like California is a loser state. There are many loser states because of policy, high taxes, uncompetitive regulation. It was already on the top of the list of being a loser state. I would never invest in New York now, and I'm not the only person saying that.
Robert, this strikes me as just a complete own goal here for New York, that they're going to chase competitive businesses even further out of their high-taxing, high-regulation jurisdiction just so they can say, hey, we're the guys who got Trump. Robert Barnes, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for walking us through this, and we'll speak to you again later on in the year. Now, time for a short break, but before that, let's go to San Francisco and meet one of the Toilet by the Bay's new election commissioners, Kelly Wong. Here she is giving an interview after her appointment earlier this week.
其實我哋都一樣有交稅，我哋一樣對社會有貢獻，但係咧，我哋政策上咧好少有我哋嘅聲音。
Now, that was Kelly right there, and she was giving an interview in Chinese, which is not so extraordinary, I suppose, in a multicultural society and a city like San Francisco. But check this out. Kelly, who has won this position, is now helping to supervise San Francisco's elections. But she's not even eligible to vote in them. She's an immigration rights activist from Hong Kong who took advantage of a measure passed by California voters, naturally, in 2020 that eliminated the citizenship requirement to sit on election boards. You can see where this is going, of course, in a country where millions of migrants are flooding in every year. Now, in the past on this program, I've suggested that Democrats are preparing to grant migrants citizenship en masse through amnesty programs and then create a whole new block of Democrat voters. But maybe stories like this make me think they're just going to change the rules and let non-citizens vote anyway. As Kelly herself said in a now-deleted LinkedIn post, quote, This appointment is a milestone for all immigrant and marginalized communities throughout San Francisco. Representation matters. Thousands of immigrants living in the city hold stakes in politics, and there is no better way to have us be represented than to serve in leadership positions, unquote. So, giving non-citizens a say in the running of elections? Hell, even letting them vote one day? Well, this is the progressive Democrat dream. What could go wrong? Adam Coleman and the story of an unhinged mayor being investigated by the FBI, next. Welcome back to the program. I want to tell you about a crazy story of political corruption in America, one that involves a small-town mayor, Tiffany Henyard of Dolton, Illinois, and her wild attempts to raise money through dodgy charities and consolidating power, turning herself into a one-woman cult of personality in small-town America. It's an amazing tale, and joining me to hear more about it is Adam Coleman, founder of Wrong Speak Publishing and a columnist with the New York Post. Adam, thank you so much for coming on board this evening. Now, the FBI is investigating this mayor, but tell us a bit of background about this mayor and some of the accusations against her, which are absolutely wild. I've been reading about them all week. I can't quite believe them.
Yeah, so basically Tiffany Henyard is the mayor for Dolton, Illinois, which Dolton is just south of Chicago. And she's also the supervisor for Thornton Township. And what that means is basically she's like the CEO for a locality. So in many ways, she's the mayor of Thornton Township, but they just call it a supervisor. And basically what she's been doing is consolidating power. She's been strong-arming people, essentially. The FBI is investigating her for intimidation, intimidating business owners who are refusing to donate money to her campaign, who are outwardly going against her. She's going after people who are siding with trustees who are challenging her in her authority. So she's quite literally a tyrant within a small village.
And let's have we got a little bit of a grab of her, I think, here. Have a look at this. This is her trying to dance around some of the allegations that have been raised. Have a look at this.
Handle anything as relates to with credit cards. As you heard me speak today in my board meeting about, I do not handle that.
Some of those charges are for you, though.
No, sir.
You didn't go to Las Vegas? What is that?
No comment.
You don't know if you were in Las Vegas?
Of course I do.
Did you fly first class to Las Vegas?
Any other questions?
You're not going to answer how taxpayer dollars are being spent? That seems odd.
I just answered it. What do you mean? I just answered your questions.
You said you wouldn't answer about Las Vegas.
You asked me a question and I responded.
Now, Adam, I gotta give her a lot of credit for just brazening that out, but is it true that she once strutted into a village board meeting dressed like a drug lord character from a movie as a DJ blared Rihanna's "Bitch Better Have My Money"?
This is absolutely true, although those are two separate occasions, I believe.
Yeah. Wow. This is, and so the FBI is investigating. Where is this all going to wind up?
Honestly, I don't know. When it comes to FBI investigations, they usually take time. They want to have a solid case. But the fact that they are talking to business owners and witnesses, they are getting accounts, I think that means a lot. It means that she's on their radar. So I don't think it's going to be swift, but I don't think it's going to take too long. I think there's a lot that's there that anybody who has two eyeballs can see.
Yeah, no, it seems pretty wild to me. I want to move on to another town in America. In Nevada, a city is facing a backlash after announcing plans to host a business fair for only black-owned businesses in celebration of Black History Month. Now, some are saying that this constitutes government-sanctioned discrimination by discriminating against businesses owned by other people, but others are saying, well, this is okay. Adam Coleman, race is always a touchy issue in the U.S. What side do you come down on this one?
It's tricky. I think when it comes to anything that's public related, as soon as you take a side or a racial lens to it, I see it like this. If we said, hey, this is for white-only businesses, would this be okay? Then, is that something that would be okay with? But then at the same time, for a lot of Black Americans, they see Black as like an ethnic group. So if they had an Italian fair for Italian Americans, would that be seen as discrimination? Or would it just be saying like, this is just a thing that we're having for Italians and it's not meant to be exclusionary in a sense? So I think it can be tricky. It depends on how you look at it. But I think it's safer to say that you should probably stay away from things like this. When you say that some people can attend and other people can't, that becomes very tricky, and you're using public funds or using politicians, public faces to have this. I think it becomes very tricky.
Yeah, you know what else is tricky though, Adam? The new Google artificial intelligence image creator, which has been making headlines around the world. It's a kind of funny story, but also serious, because Google is basically how everyone gets their information, and they've got such a big presence in schools. Their new AI image generator has been slammed for being completely woke and trying to make everything diverse, making the American founding fathers diverse, Black popes, female popes, Scandinavian ice farmers looking diverse. We're looking at some of the images on the screen that have come out of this, and it even refuses to recreate Norman Rockwell paintings because they, quote, perpetuate harmful stereotypes. Now, are you concerned, Adam, that our new woke AI overlords are rewriting history and may even wind up rewriting reality?
I'm not too worried, and part of the reason why is that we are still ruled by human beings, and human beings can recognize this as nonsense. So granted, human beings are the ones who set up an environment for AI to construct this particular thing. So that also means that human beings can also correct it. So I'm not certain, I'm not necessarily worried about this particular type of issue.
Fair enough, fair enough. Adam Coleman, thank you so much for joining us on the U.S. Report. Now, I know what you're thinking. Isn't it time for Only in America? Well, almost, coming up right after the break. But here's a wild story for you. Remember Commander, Joe Biden's German Shepherd that had to be sent to a farm after he bit a Secret Service agent? Well, turns out there wasn't just one biting incident, but instead 24 attacks by Commander on Secret Service agents and other White House personnel at the White House, in the Rose Garden, in Nantucket, even at the bookseller's lobby in the White House. Sorry, what? Look, I'm a big dog lover, and if you're like me, you know there are no bad dogs, only bad owners. And I can tell you one other thing. Poppy the Wonder Spaniel would never take a chomp out of any law enforcement agent. Only in America, next. Welcome back to the program, and now it's time for a little segment we like to call Only in America. On Wednesday, the Biden administration launched its plan to forgive, just wipe, student debts for tens of thousands of Americans who owed collectively more than $1.2 billion because they thought it would be a real swell idea to take out loans to study stuff like, I don't know, the semiotics of heteronormative oppression on Gilligan's Island, and learn how actually everything is really racist. Of course, that means that productive taxpayers in America will now be footing the bill for their folly. It's just a shame, then, that they didn't make these grads go door to door to collect, like they're forced to do in this video, courtesy of our friends at the Babylon Bee.
Why should I have to pay for your life choices?
An educated populace is good for all of society. Carl Guevara or Che Marx said that. I don't know. I don't remember. I partied really hard that semester. Delta, Upsilon, Mu, whoop, whoop. I learned so much about the world in college. I took art classes and learned how art is racist and patriarchal. And I took science classes and learned how science is racist and patriarchal. And I took gender studies classes
Racist
and learned how—
patriarchal, yeah. I get it.
What? No, of course not. That doesn't even make any sense. See, this is why people like you need people like me, because I understand how things work.
That everything is racist and patriarchal except gender studies?
Well, yes, but I just spent 4 years and $200,000 learning it, so I understand it on a deeper level.
You spent $200,000 studying, what was your major again?
Genderqueer feminist intersectional theory.
Gender what?
You blue-collar folks are so ignorant. That's why you people who do gross, sweaty jobs where you, do things, should subsidize people like me, who learns all the philosophical stuff.
Look, I am done with this conversation. I worked hard. My wife put herself through college without government handouts. And we didn't do it just so we could give you $10,000 to study gender honey nut Queerios.
One teensy little thing I forgot to mention, this whole sponsor college grad thing, it's kind of mandatory. The president guy said so. So hand over the 10 G's.
Yeah, who did what in her gender Queerios this morning? That's all the time we've got for this week. And in the meantime, if any scary college grads are coming to your house, chase them away by doing your best Joe Biden creepy whisper. Bye-bye.